In this video I'm going to be making a simple but very useful scraping tool using just a knife blade and some scrap pallet wood. I'm not sure what type of wood this is, but it's some sort of hardwood that I took from a pallet, as I mentioned earlier. I chose this piece from my scrap bin because it was slightly wider than the length of the knife blade, and it was long enough to get out of it what I needed. First I made some markings for the shape I wanted for the head of the tool using a small square and a washer to mark up some curves. And then I worked on the shape of what would be the handle of the tool. I used the bandsaw to cut out the shape. Then at the disc sander I could refine the shape of the curved areas. I wanted to round over the handle, and a router table would have been ideal for that, but I don't have one. Actually, I do have one, but it isn't set up. In fact, it's not even in the workshop because I just haven't found a home for it. But that's okay because I was in the mood for using some hand tools anyway. So after making some reference marks for where I wanted to remove material, I used my spoke shave to shape it. I first took some shavings at roughly 45 degrees, and then I could work my way around the handle to round it over. It's a really enjoyable tool to use. It's great fun to carve with as long as you keep the blade nice and sharp and set up the tool properly. I've got a video on my channel about me restoring this one that I'm using here, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description box if you're interested in seeing it. I decided to cut a bit more of a scoop into the handle to make it more comfortable to hold. So after marking that up, I took some more shavings. The head end of this piece of wood had an angle cut into it, and I decided to round this over, so I cut some material away at the bandsaw and then I rounded it over at the disc sander. And while I was there I could do some more sanding to shape it. I then did some hand sanding at 100 grit. Next I wanted to add the knife blade, and first I measured the thickness of it using my calipers. The blades I have here come from a pound shop and they measure just under 0.5 millimeter in thickness. Out of all of my saws I found the one with the thinnest kerf, which was this one at just over 0.5 millimeter. So I used that one to make a cut into the head to accommodate the blade. As expected, the blade was a bit of a loose fit, and I did consider some ways of locking it in place using a screw or a nut and bolt, but I preferred the idea of having it as a friction fit so that it's quick and easy to put in and take out. And I could do that just by simply adding a layer of masking tape onto the blade. And then it was a perfect fit. For finish, I'd use some of my homemade oil wax mixture. This is available to buy both as an original formula and a food safe version via my Etsy store, and I'll link to that in the description box below if you're interested in trying it out. It brought out the grain quite nicely, as you can see, and it makes the wood super smooth. So this scraper is really useful for things like removing finish from wood as an alternative to using a card scraper or sanding. And by pushing down on the head of the tool you can alter how much downward pressure you want to apply. If you're worried about the corners of the blade gouging into the wood, it's pretty simple just to ease over the edges of the blade using a file or some sandpaper, but I don't think it's really necessary. At least it's not something I've had any issues with. It's also really useful for scraping off old glue or paint from your workshop surfaces. I like to resharpen my knife blades, and I get loads of use out of them just by putting a new edge on them using a 400 grit belt on my benchtop grinder and sander. I know that they're supposed to be disposable, but why throw something away when you can resharpen it in 5 seconds? Finally, I drilled a pilot hole into the handle using a small drill bit, and then I widened it with an 8mm bit so that I can hang it up on my tool wall. That's the scraper finished and it works really well. If I were to make another one though, there are a few things I'd do differently. Firstly, I'd have chosen a slightly thicker piece of wood to start with. That way I could have cut the slot for the knife blade a little bit deeper, and I think that would help to hold the blade a little bit more rigidly. The piece of wood that I used was 15mm thick. I think perhaps another 5mm, so something like a 20mm thick piece of wood would be ideal for this. Secondly, I might shape the handle so that it's wider at the end. That would make it a little bit easier to hold and give you more purchase. I'm not sure if purchase is the right word, but I'm sure you know what I mean. This project was really quick and easy to build. I think it took about an hour and a half, and it was a nice project to work on. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already for more weekly woodworking videos. And if you'd like to support the channel and get early access to my videos, as well as some exclusive content, woodworking plans, and a credit at the end of my videos, you can do so by joining my Patreon page, and there'll be a link to that in the description box below. Thank you for watching.